Why have the United States and Russia been at odds for so many decades? From covert operations to open confrontations, the tension between these two superpowers has shaped global politics for over a century. Let's dive into the origins and evolution of this enduring rivalry, uncovering the intricate details and key events that have defined their complex relationship. Number 1. Birth of the Cold War. The seeds of U.S. Russia tension were planted in the aftermath of World War II. As the war ended, the world saw the emergence of two dominant powers, the United States and the Soviet Union. Despite their alliance against Nazi Germany, the ideological chasm between the capitalist U.S. and the communist Soviet Union became glaringly apparent. This ideological clash set the stage for the Cold War, a period of geopolitical tension that officially began in the late 1940s. Ideological differences. The United States championed capitalism and democracy, advocating for free market economies and individual liberties. In stark contrast, the Soviet Union promoted a communist ideology based on state control of resources and a one-party political system. This fundamental difference fueled mutual distrust and a desire to spread their respective ideologies globally. Yalta and Potsdam Conferences. Tensions began to surface during the Yalta, February 1945, and Potsdam, July-August 1945. Conferences where the Allies discussed post-war Europe. Disagreements over the fate of Eastern European countries and the future of Germany highlighted the growing rift. The Soviet Union aimed to establish a buffer zone of communist states to protect against future invasions, while the U.S. sought to promote democratic governments. Number 2. Nuclear arms race. One of the most defining aspects of U.S.-Russia tensions was the nuclear arms race. The end of World War II saw the United States as the sole possessor of nuclear weapons, demonstrated by the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. However, this monopoly was short-lived. Soviet nuclear development. The Soviet Union successfully tested its first atomic bomb in 1949, marking the beginning of a fierce arms race. Both nations embarked on a massive buildup of nuclear arsenals, leading to the doctrine of mutually assured destruction, MAD. This concept meant that any nuclear attack by one superpower would result in the total annihilation of both, creating a precarious balance of power. Number 3. Proxy wars and espionage. Unable to confront each other directly due to the risk of nuclear war, the US and the Soviet Union engaged in numerous proxy wars and covert operations to expand their influence. Korean War. The Korean War, 1950 to 1953, was one of the first major conflicts of the Cold War. The US supported South Korea, while the Soviet Union and China backed North Korea. The war ended in an armistice, with Korea remaining divided along the 38th parallel. Vietnam War. The Vietnam War, 1955 to 1975, was another significant proxy conflict. The U.S. intervened to support the anti-communist government of South Vietnam, while the Soviet Union and China provided aid to North Vietnam. The war ended with the fall of Saigon and the unification of Vietnam under communist control. Soviet-Afghan War. In 1979, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan to support the communist government against insurgent groups. The U.S. provided significant aid to the Mujahideen fighters, including weapons and training. The war drained Soviet resources and contributed to the eventual collapse of the Soviet Union. Number 4. Space race. The competition between the U.S. and the Soviet Union extended beyond Earth with the space race. This technological and ideological rivalry aimed to demonstrate superiority in space exploration. Sputnik and early achievements. The Soviet Union took an early lead with the launch of Sputnik, the world's first artificial satellite, in 1957. This achievement shocked the world and spurred the United States to accelerate its space program. In 1961, Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first human to orbit the Earth. Apollo moon landing. The U.S. responded with the Apollo program, culminating in the Apollo 11 mission in 1969, where astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin became the first humans to set foot on the moon. This monumental achievement was a significant victory for the U.S. in the space race. Number 5. Detente and collapse of Soviet Union. The 1970s saw a period of detente, a temporary easing of tensions between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. This period was marked by diplomatic efforts and arms control agreements. Strategic Arms Limitation Talks, SALT. The SALT agreements aim to limit the number of strategic nuclear weapons. SALT-I, signed in 1972, resulted in the Anti-Ballistic Missile (ABM) Treaty and a temporary freeze on the number of ICBMs and SLBMs. SALT-EU, negotiated in the late 1970s, aimed for further limitations but was never ratified due to renewed hostilities. Reagan and the Evil Empire. The election of Ronald Reagan in 1980 brought a more confrontational approach to U.S.-Soviet relations. Reagan referred to the Soviet Union as the Evil Empire and initiated a significant military buildup, including the Strategic Defense Initiative, SDI, a proposed missile defense system. Gorbachev and reforms. The rise of Mikhail Gorbachev in the mid-1980s brought significant changes. His policies of glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring, aimed to reform the Soviet system. Gorbachev's willingness to engage with the West led to landmark agreements like the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces (INF) Treaty in 1987, which eliminated an entire class of nuclear missiles. Number 6. Post-Cold War relations. Even after the Cold War, relations remained complicated and often tense. NATO expansion. One of the major sources of post-Cold War tension has been the eastward expansion of NATO. Former Warsaw Pact countries and Soviet republics joined NATO, which Russia viewed as a threat to its security. The inclusion of countries like Poland, Hungary, and the Baltic states strained relations further. Conflicts in Georgia and Ukraine. Russia's involvement in conflicts in Georgia, 2008, and Ukraine, 2014, significantly worsened relations with the U.S., the annexation of Crimea, and support for separatist movements in eastern Ukraine led to international condemnation and economic sanctions against Russia. Number 7. Cyber warfare and modern tensions. In recent years, cyber warfare has emerged as a new front in U.S. Russia tensions. The rise of global terrorism and the need for international cooperation have also created a complex dynamic where the two nations sometimes find themselves as reluctant partners. Cyber espionage and attacks. Cyber espionage and attacks have become significant issues. Both nations have accused each other of hacking government and private sector networks. High-profile incidents, such as the SolarWinds hack attributed to Russian operatives, have highlighted the vulnerabilities and potential consequences of cyber warfare. Terrorism and cooperation. Despite their rivalry, the U.S. and Russia have occasionally cooperated on issues like counterterrorism. Both nations face threats from terrorist organizations and have shared intelligence and coordinated efforts to combat global terrorism. However, this cooperation is often overshadowed by broader geopolitical tensions. The decades-long tension between the United States and Russia is a complex web of historical events, ideological battles, and power struggles. As global dynamics continue to evolve, the relationship between these two nations will undoubtedly remain a pivotal factor in world affairs. If you found this exploration interesting, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more insightful content. Thank you for watching.